This is AP Med. Today I'm interviewing Marcos Gomez Ambriz. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Anything from your background, cultural-wise, professional-wise, personally, anything?
Yeah, so I'm currently on the Northeast now, but I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I was born and raised. For a large proportion of my life, I went to the University of Arizona, honors college for undergrad, and then when it came time for medical school, I somehow ended up on the Northeast. And I've enjoyed it ever since. Kind of how I got here to medical school. I didn't really know where I would end up, really. I was the first one in my family to go to college. Kind of the expectation for a lot of the people in my family is not really finishing high school, unfortunately. So when it came time for applying to college, I kind of just applied to the University of Arizona. That was the only school I applied, and I got in, thankfully. And I thought I was going to be an immigration lawyer when I first got to college. Both my parents immigrated from Mexico, and growing up with that experience, that motivated me to, be an advocate for people like my parents. But as I got to experience some of the classes, it turns out I didn't like it very much. So after that, I thought I was going to be a marine biologist, but after taking maybe some courses related to that, I kind of realized then that it wasn't the field I wanted to go into. But it did spark an interest in the sciences. I started taking some anatomy classes, some biochemistry classes, and really enjoyed them. And when you take classes like that in college, you get to interact with a lot of pre-med students. And that's, I think, what kind of inspired me to look into becoming a doctor, was through hearing other people wanting to pursue medicine. And obviously, I had to think of a better reason than just saying because other people around me wanted to go to medicine. But I quickly learned what being a physician is like and the different opportunities you have. For me, I think being a physician is such a great opportunity for someone who cares about health policy and healthcare outcomes. As a physician there, you're interacting with the patients, you're treating them, and I not only want to do that, I want to do research as well in health outcomes research. So that's kind of how I ended up here at where I'm at in Beth, Israel, taking a year off from medical school to do health policy research as the Zimmerbaum Fellow.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to ask you a lot more about your research in a bit, but let's just cover the common bases. So you were saying that you got interested in medicine from the first place by seeing other people like really ambitious and motivated to get into medicine, right?
Yeah.
What was that underlying thing that you found that gave you the reason to do it? Because like you said, you kind of need more than just a reason of saying, oh, I kind of wanted to do it because I saw other people wanted to do it too, and it seemed pretty interesting.
Yeah. I don't think it was like an epiphany all of a sudden. I think it was a lot of reflecting on my upbringing. I grew up in a household with two undocumented parents, low income, and oftentimes we had to rely on free health clinics and free dental clinics for our basic health needs. And those experiences, in retrospect, we were very fortunate to be able even to get health care. But I found that an injustice, really, in a country where, we have the best medicine, but the access is just not there. So I think that was one when reflecting back. Another thing is a more personal story. In college, I actually ended up in the hospital, and I was uninsured at the time. And I remember falling into medical debt and how that experience kind of set me back in a lot of ways. One of them is the financial repercussions of medical debt. It impacts your credit score, it impacts your ability, to build credit. And that experience myself, I realized, medical debt is a pretty prevalent issue in the United States. And that was like one of the experiences where I'm like, I want to not only be a physician, but I also want to do research on topics like medical debt, medical access, and outcomes-based research. So I think in retrospect, those are kind of two big things in my life that pushed me towards pursuing medicine is not just being a physician, but also being a physician scientist doing research in healthcare outcomes. And also, I like science. That's obviously a given going into medicine. You really have to like the sciences, anatomy, biochemistry, and physiology. So I think medicine just filled all my cups personally.
Okay. Have you ever considered a MD PhD? Because you sound like you're really, really passionate about research.
Yeah, I think one thing with being a first generation is that you don't really know all the different paths you can go into. Like, I didn't know a master's of public health existed at all before applying to medical school. And it actually was recently that I learned that you can do a master's in public health or a master's in epidemiology. So I think in my general surgery, when I apply to general surgery, a part of the training is you take 2 years off to do some sort of research. I think in those 2 years, I'm going to pursue a master's in epidemiology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, so since you're currently in your research year, you're going to be applying for residency next year, correct? Okay.
Yeah, all my colleagues back at Temple, they're all currently in the process of applying. So I'm like experiencing it through them and kind of getting advice from their experiences so far. So yeah, I'll be in the 2027 cycle.
Okay. How's that feeling? Like, I know I hear this from time to time that people in medical school, that they see their friends in college, and then they see that they get in the workforce really, really early. Then they're in medical school, and then they're still continuing their education. Is that kind of how you feel right now? Like, they're applying for residency and they're like 1 year earlier than you're going to be doing it?
Yeah. I think obviously it's sad for me personally. I'm very happy for them, but I think the group, my friends back home at Temple, they were really like my bedrock of community. We did everything together, and seeing them kind of go off into the real world and be doctors, it's bittersweet, I would say. But considering that I'm a non-traditional student, I experienced it while applying to medical school. A lot of my friends at the time were already applying, getting in, and I ended up doing like 2 gap years. So I got to experience a little bit of that and the feeling of missing out, or FOMO.
Okay.
But I think it's bittersweet, and I am happy that I have them to rely on to gain advice and kind of learn from their mistakes or successes while applying to residency. So I think regardless, I'm very happy with the decision I made. But they aren't. They always poke fun at me because they're like, "Why did you do this to us? We miss you. Come back."
Oh, damn.
Jokingly.
Wait, could I ask you something?
Yeah.
Wait, matter of fact, could I guess? Could I guess where you're from? Are you Colombian?
Sure. No.
No? Okay. Where are you from?
No.
Where are you from?
I'm from Mexico.
You're from Mexico? Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your
What made
favorite
you guess
Mexican?
Colombian?
I don't know. I know someone that's Colombian that looks kind of like you. That's why.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. What's your favorite Mexican dish?
My favorite Mexican dish. Let's see. I have a lot. Wow. I really like tamales. That's a dish that I have spent a lot of years trying to perfect, and it always gives me an excuse just to call my mom and just to talk to her, but also ask about like why my masa didn't come out right, or why my tamales taste funny, or why they don't taste the way that yours come out. So I would say that, yeah. And it's always we always have that during big events like Christmas, Thanksgiving, any type of like big family event. There's always tamales there, so it kind of makes me feel nostalgic in a way.
Yeah, Thanksgiving's coming up. It's there's gonna be a lot of tamales at my table. Yeah.
I told my colleagues here at Beth Israel that I would make tamales for them, just to give me an excuse to make some.
Oh.
But also share my culture with them.
Yeah, I think I always loved I forgot what those days are called. Like kind of like potlucks. I don't know. I forgot the specific name, but like the potlucks where everybody brings their own culture, and then they everyone tries their own cultured food. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't know there was a specific name for it. I thought they were just
I think
potlucks.
there's a
Is it
specific
just
name.
cultural
I don't know.
potlucks?
Yeah, maybe I don't know. I feel like there's a specific name and I can't remember it, but I don't know. Yeah. Oh, okay. Could you tell me more about your undergraduate years and kind of your journey to applying to medical school? Like you said, since like at the beginning you were kind of unsure that you wanted to do medicine, then you saw other people wanted to pursue medicine, then that kind of gave you like a spark into getting into medicine, right? But how did you, after you realized that at that moment, because I'm sure a lot of students come into college thinking that they don't know what they want to do exactly, then maybe midway, just like you, they realize, wow, I want to pursue medicine. So how did you kind of like change your mindset and change like the trajectory of what you were doing in college, whether it was research? I'm assuming you did research in undergraduate as well, right? Or
yeah,
like
surprisingly though, I didn't do too much research.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, but I know that's like the big dogma right now in applying to medical school is research. Mm-hmm. But I think personally, I don't think research was a big factor in my acceptance.
So what do you think was what do you think was like your most impactful experience, and the question I said previously as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, it was being true to why I wanted to go into medicine, and that's service. And I think that reflected a lot in my application. I had a lot of activities where I was partaking in service initiatives, but also, creating my own service initiatives. Obviously, a lot of them were related to medicine, and some of them are things that I just enjoyed. Like I love cooking. So I went to, it was like a soup kitchen type where you can help make meals for people who are experiencing homelessness. Another thing, it's just helping organize like blood drives and things like that. So my application was very service oriented, and I did maybe one or two things of research, but it wasn't really the highlight. And I think if you have a cohesive application that really shows who you are, I think that's worth a lot more than just having all of these different pockets of things you did that really don't tie together. And surprisingly, I know this is probably gonna shock a bunch of people, I wasn't like a straight A student. I wasn't what you would consider a scholar, but I think, I had the basic requirements to get into medical school. And I think when people feel like they're applying to medical school, they need to be perfect, all A's, honors, and everything like that. And not to get, don't get me wrong, that is true. You don't apply to medical school if you failed, multiple classes or haven't shown growth. It's if you fail classes, I take that back. You can, improve and show growth and still get into medical school. Mm-hmm. But I think it's making sure that the story you're telling people is really reflective in your application. And, when I say I wasn't a stellar student, I wasn't a very, I don't know how else to say, but very smart, straight A's, honors. And I still interviewed at places I thought I would never get an interview. I remember one of them was actually pretty cool. I got to interview at Duke, and that's a program that I thought I only applied to because I got to apply to a bunch of schools for free. So when I got that interview invite, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Why me, someone who's, very basic stats. But I think it was really the fact that my story was cohesive and it was reflected in my application. Sorry, that was a long-winded
No,
answer.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question I've never asked before, but you kind of made me think of it right now. So since you mentioned having multiple interviews, two questions. What was one thing during an interview, like an unforgettable interview experience where you're like, wow, I kind of scuffed that question entirely, or something like that, or maybe the interviewer kind of like, I don't know, they scared you a little bit, and another one would be what made you choose the medical school that you ended up picking? Because like you said, you had multiple interviews. I'm assuming you got multiple acceptances too. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny that you brought that first question brought a big memory up. It was actually during my Duke interview. It was with a surgeon. I forget her name. but it was more of like an ethical type of question. And she asked me, what do you think about companies promoting these sugary drinks at sporting events? And like, I knew in my head I needed to give like a very ethical answer, or something that was just like very palpable, for like, nothing too controversial or whatever. And I just bombed it. I knew leaving that interview with her, there was multiple throughout the day, that my acceptance was probably on the line because of my answer. It was just, I wish I would have prepared better for those ethical types of questions. I remember just saying that, what did I say? Saying something along that, like, kids are naive and don't really know what's being advertised to them, and I knew I shouldn't have used the word naive. And then she automatically turned and said, well, what do you mean by naive? Are you saying all kids are naive? And I just had to slowly work my way out of this hole I dug myself in. But I just remember that only being like probably one of my worst interviews throughout the whole cycle. But, you know, thankfully my acceptance was not like based on just one person. You know, it's a group of people who make that decision. Was your next question like a more positive experience, or why I chose Temple?
Yeah, like what kind of made you, maybe you had a good experience during that interview instead at Temple, and then that made you pick them over other schools, for instance?
Yeah, I think what I believe made Temple unique is a little bit of background. So I go to the regional campus that Temple offers. So there's Temple Main, located in Philadelphia, and then there is the St. Luke's campus, located in the Lehigh Valley. And I knew going to university as part of like a honors program, I really thrived in these smaller classroom settings. You know, Temple, each incoming class is over about 200 students, while my class was only about a little bit over 30 students. And, you know, from my experience undergrad, I knew like that's what I wanted to do. And plus, the Lehigh Valley kind of feels like home in a way, even though I'm from Arizona. The Lehigh Valley is very diverse. A large proportion of the community is Hispanic. And, you know, all these factors really, you know, I was eager to go to the regional campus, even though I wouldn't be, you know, at Temple, where they have like all this research going on in a big city. And, you know, if I were to do it again, I would definitely choose St. Luke's again. I love the community I built there. And like, they've invested a lot in me and given me so many opportunities. And, you know, I would choose them over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's a fulfilling story right there. Yeah. I'm still kind of like appalled from your last answer that you mentioned that, well, one, of course, the question, I mean the question and then your answer to that, and then two, kind of the fact that you were gonna air out the university, Duke University, and then you were thinking of, oh wait, let me remember my exact interviewer. It's a little funny to me, but yeah.
Yeah, I was so caught off guard. I thought it was going to be like, tell me about yourself, or you talk about this in your application. Can you tell me more about it? But to go straight to like an ethical dilemma type of question, I was not prepared. But I knew moving forward to prepare for those questions. So during my other interviews, you know, I was ready to have, you know, an anecdote in mind, or, you know all the tenets of like ethics and how to apply them. So, you know, it sucks that I had to learn that during one of like the coolest interviews one of the coolest places I got to interview at, but it was a great learning experience.
Okay. All right. Let me put you on the spot. How would you answer that question now? I'm sure you had a lot of time to think about it, but
how do I feel about it now? If they were to ask me.
No, I mean, how would you answer it now?
Oh, yeah. I think learning more about health policy, I think these companies advertising at like child sporting events. Let's see. I don't think there's like an ethical dilemma associated with it. I think you kind of have to understand like why the why the people who are running the like childhood sports event, like why they reached out to them for like sponsorship. Is it because of money? And then you have to think about, is this money going to a good cause, like supporting programs like childhood sporting events, that have shown to have good outcomes. So I think by outright just saying, is this good or bad, I think it's a little more nuanced than that. Obviously there is a huge obesity crisis among, youth, and advertising sugary drinks to that population is probably not good to help, address that issue. But you have to think about the financial side. If having these sponsorships will allow these programs to continue, right, that can help kids stay active and involved and, help them on a good path later on. So it's good and bad, looking at both sides of the argument.
I mean, yeah, that is true. Ethical dilemmas, there's never just one correct answer. You have to consider both sides.
Yes, I always remember when I was researching how to prepare for these, they always say never, always choose the middle. Never pick the extremes.
Really? I've also heard that the interviewers, they never want to hear you just pick in the middle as well, because that means you're not decisive. You can't make a decision at the same time.
Really?
As well. You don't want to be the middleman. Yeah. I don't know.
Wow.
I've heard, yeah.
Things must have changed since I last applied.
I don't know.
But I think everyone has their own theories. I think that's probably, if you have like a theory on like how people make decisions, I could see that point that, they want someone who's decisive. But I think also having someone who could look at both sides is also really good, personally.
That's true. Yeah, I love that question. Maybe I'll ask it in the future to other people as well, because it's such a simple question at the core of it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So far, you're in your fourth year right now. Well, you're about to enter your fourth year. Wait. Okay. Wait. How does medical school work? So it's gonna be you 3 years. Then now you're in your research year. So is this considered your fourth year? And then your next year is considered your fifth, or is this a research year? And then next year's your fourth year technically, or?
Yeah. So I started at a weird time. Just because this is how the application cycle worked for the Zimmerbaum Fellowship. So most fellows, ideally, they want you to start in August.
Yeah.
And my school, the way that our schedule is structured, by August, we have already started the new calendar year. So if I didn't do any of my fourth year rotations, I would have come back after the fellowship and been like very behind. So I decided to start some of my rotations. I did my sub-internship in general surgery. I did some electives, and that filled in enough time so I didn't waste time before my fellowship and was able to take off at a good time. So when I return, the only thing I have to do is my ICU rotation, my emergency medicine rotation, and then a few sub-Is. Sub-Is at different institutions. Yeah. Ideally, you want to do your sub-Is at the institutions you want to go to, but there's mixed advice. If let's say if I really want to come back to the BI, I do a sub-internship and I completely bomb it, right? I just lost my chance at potentially interviewing there. So when you choose your sub-Is, ideally you want to balance, if it's a place you really, really want to go to and your clinical skills aren't the best, or you think you're not going to do well, you don't want to risk by performing poorly and they don't offer you an interview. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is tricky. I've heard of sub-Is only being like positive, like you show your performance there, but I've never considered the fact that you're kind of betting on yourself and what if I do bad? But I always like to think of the positives, just always bet on yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely a good mentality to have. But the reality is, what if you have a bad month, or what if it's just, what if something happens, and you just, instead of having an opportunity to interview and show your true self, you just, not lucked out, but just, you completely bombed your chance to interview there. So it's definitely a, risk benefit analysis.
Okay. Yeah. everything in medicine is never so one-sided. You have to choose your battles, choose your fights. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah. So the question I was gonna get at. So you're gonna start getting prepared for the residency application soon. And what residency, like what specialty are you thinking of right now? I think you mentioned general surgery, but I'm not sure. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, getting to this point where I had like made up my mind has been a long and difficult decision. So like going back a little bit, I came into medical school wanting to be a forensic pathologist, and a little bit of background behind that. Once I got into medical school, I realized that I need to start exploring different specialties. So I emailed a bunch of doctors back home in Arizona, and the only one that got back to me was the medical examiner. And I didn't really know what forensic pathology was. I saw it in movies and heard about it. But when I got there, I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. It's an intersection of like law, medicine, and it was amazing. And, my first 2 years of medical school, I thought I was going to be a forensic pathologist. And everyone, like all my friends, all my classmates, like they would, tell me, you're going to be a forensic pathologist, it's perfect for you, you love it. And then once I started my clinical rotations, my first elective was surgery, or my first rotation was surgery. And I remember just like falling in love with it. And even before then, I really enjoyed anatomy. That was one of my majors in undergrad. So to me, anatomy it made sense to me. I already had a bunch of experience beforehand, but seeing it in practice in general surgery, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Wow. And I've always been very hands-on and really like fast-paced environments where you need to make, decisions on the spot and use, visual like being able to like visualize things in your head, like anatomy and the way that certain structures are oriented in space has always come easy to me. Mm-hmm. So obviously general surgery was hard. I won't lie that sometimes waking up at 4 or 3 in the morning was tough and rounding on patients and never really know when you're going to leave. But I think it was all worth it, seeing patients and being in the operating room and helping out where I could. But then my next rotation after that was OBGYN, and I loved it. Like, I never thought in a million years I would have enjoyed OBGYN, but doing it, it was such an amazing experience, being able to deliver a baby, being able to, talk to an elderly lady experiencing incontinence and going into the OR and helping, treat her incontinence. I was like, this is amazing. And those two were the fields kind of like throughout the whole year where I knew it was either going to be general surgery and OBGYN. And I would say it wasn't until recently that I made up my mind to pursue general surgery. And yeah, that's where I am now. And sometimes I do have these moments where I like flip back to like wanting to do OBGYN, but it's just so hard. And it's comforting to know that a lot of people have that issue. Not that issue, I wouldn't say it was an issue, but that dilemma when deciding on a surgical specialty. Was there another part of your question? I think I forgot.
No, I don't think so. No, I think you answered the question perfectly fine. Yeah. Oh yeah, mentioning now that you were kind of in like a crossroads between OBGYN and general surgery, and now you haven't fully picked it yet. I mean, you can still change your mind the next year for all you know.
Yeah.
But I remember earlier you mentioned that you wanted to be a immigration lawyer, correct? In the beginning? Yeah. So how did you, this is a big decision. How did you kind of like, I don't want to say forget about that career path, but how did you think, I want to do medicine instead? Was it just seeing the others around you wanting to pursue medicine? How was it?
Yeah, I think being the first one in my family to pursue medicine, I kind of navigated college without any like real guidance. I would say, I had advisors who would help me, when it comes to choosing classes and stuff, but I didn't really have someone there to show me, this is what you could be when you're done with college. A lot of my family members after, finishing middle school or like dropping out of high school, they just worked at McDonald's or our family landscaping business. So that was really the only experience I had to any like professional or job. And so I just kind of navigated college that way. I got anything that would interest me, I would do it, and experience it, and, try to project that in the future and see if this is something that I really want to do or not. So I think I had a pretty open mind. I had a life experience with, having family members who are immigrants and having to navigate the immigration system. That was my first kind of guiding light that, I should give law or immigration law a chance. And I experienced a little bit of it by taking a class, I think it was called Sex, Drugs, and the Supreme Court, and it talks about law. And I had this thought in mind that I wanted to be a Supreme Court judge, like Judge Sotomayor, and that was kind of like my guiding star. But it's just, I didn't enjoy the classes very much. I think the work that they do is awesome and amazing, but after I would try to project it into a long-term career, I'd realize it's not something that I want to do. And that's kind of the same thing with like marine biology. I took the classes and I thought it was cool, and I love fish. That's probably why I thought about marine biology. I remember as a kid having a bunch of aquariums and watched a lot of National Geographic documentaries. So experienced it, and the job prospects aren't the best from what I hear. So I think that also played into it.
Okay, yeah.
But then as I slowly creeped into the sciences, I realized that I was actually pretty good at science and really enjoyed it. And as I mentioned, a lot of biology majors, anatomy, physiology, they're oftentimes pre-med. So that was my first time talking to pre-meds and kind of seeing, that what a doctor is. Because I won't lie to you, not seeing a doctor for a lot of my childhood, I didn't really know. I didn't even know if it was not something that I could do. So getting that exposure was, a big factor. And then after I started doing my own shadowing, my own, research, I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Being a doctor is something that I never knew that I could do, but, it is. There's nothing stopping me, right? So I would say, I guess in sum, I let my experiences guide a lot of what I do and how I navigate medicine so far. And obviously I've developed a lot, and I rely on mentors a lot now instead of navigating blind. But still, I try to stick to my roots and remember what was that first, what initially brought me to medicine, and what are my reasons for being here that try to help guide me as I get deeper in my career.
All right, yeah. So you mentioned your experiences and how they kind of formed who you are today, and I think it's really important. One point you really touched upon was that you never really met a doctor at a young age, and that kind of influenced your decision of saying, oh, I don't know if I could really do this. And I think it's really important that early on you get exposed to any form of medicine. For instance, for me, during high school, I was in a medical academy program, and that influenced me to want to pursue medicine to where I'm at right now. So yeah, I think it is important to know really young that you can achieve what other people are doing, especially as an underrepresented minority. Both of us, we don't see that many doctors that are Latino. Only 6% of all doctors are Latino, and how I think it's also really important that we have mentors that are in those positions as well. And over time, more Latinos will be in the healthcare field, right? But I think it's important that you could be a mentor to people younger than yourself, and then show them that I'm slowly making my way up there to get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of good points. I think it's important to understand that a lot of the debate now with DEI is that, why does representation or why does diversity matter? And, for people who are big proponents of DEI, it's for what you mentioned, having that representation, being able to visualize yourself as a doctor. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for meeting other Latinos, or even just meeting doctors, who have some resemblance or a same lived experience, they don't have to be Latino, just being able to connect with them in that way and, connect with them. For example, I've met plenty of doctors who come from a low income background or the first ones to attend college, and they weren't Latino, and they've offered me such great mentorship throughout. But it's stories like that and experiences like that are why DEI is important, you know. But also the mentorship aspect is super, super important. As I mentioned, I navigated college pretty blind, I would say. But now, as I've gotten deeper in my, career and through medical school, mentors are super, super important. And it's so important to have like a diverse panel of mentors. You can have life mentors, you can have career mentors, you can just have mentors who you just talk about random things. It doesn't matter, but it's so good to have someone there to give you a perspective on whatever, you need help with. And also, too, it's good to have someone to give you a different perspective. Mentors sometimes can be sounding boards where they'll just tell you what you want to hear. But the really, really good mentors are ones that will walk through problems with you and, will push you to think differently or, ask you, like, if this is the decision you want to make, like, why? Is this, like, a genuine decision you want to make? But mentorship is super, super important. And I think playing both roles of mentor and mentee is pretty common among first generation, specifically, me being Latino, being able to, have mentors to help guide me through my career, but also act as a mentor for others. I think being able to share my experiences, what I learned with others, is another way to keep that, keep these bridges going,
Yeah.
when as you're moving in your career, you want to bring people with you and lay the foundation for them too. So, yeah, these are all like super important things that I've learned, the mentorship and, staying true to who you are as a person.
Yeah, it's definitely important to find those mentors as early as you can find them, right? Yeah. And also, one more thing about, so you mentioned having a lot of mentors and how you switch from mentee to mentorship really quickly, right? How do you recommend staying in touch with those mentors? Because you could meet a lot of people in the healthcare field, but how do you what's a good tip to stay in touch with them? Because I always hear that you should stay in contact with people, but it is kind of hard to stay. I hear things like, oh, you should update them on things you're doing, but what's one tip you could give about that?
I think it's very mentor specific. I think if it's a mentor who is like very busy, or you in medicine you want to maintain professionalism. So I would say for mentors who I really turn to for like career advice, professional advice, oftentimes they're heads of departments. They're like, for example, my dean at our medical school. Yeah. Those in like higher positions. I usually just err on the side of caution and just stick with email, I think. Okay. And I think as you develop a better relationship with them and, you feel like you can send more like personal emails, like give them updates on things like that. I think it's all, I guess, from perspective. If you think you have a good relationship, I think you should do those like updates on here, things that I'm doing now. Or just a simple like, hey, how are you doing? Or how are things? Is, I think, a pretty good idea. Then for, I think, mentors who are more of like my stage in training, because you'd be surprised. I have mentors who are only a year ahead of me. And those are more like less formal, like text message. If I have a question about, life or just general personal like mentorship, I say that with air quotes because it's just a friend, but I consider that mentorship. So yeah, I would just say definitely it's all really relative to who is that mentor you're communicating with. And for those who are more like senior or professional, like deans, attending physicians, I'd say just keeping in contact through email is good. And then as you develop that relationship, be more, you can kind of bring your guard down a little bit and, give them updates. Sorry, that's my dog in the background.
No, that's fine. You're good. Okay. So, what is one piece of advice that you would offer to a pre-med? It could be very general, very specific. Up to you.
Yeah. I think my biggest piece of advice is keeping an open mind. I think having an open mind and not pigeonholing yourself into doing one thing will open the door to like many opportunities. For example, I talked about my experience wanting to be a forensic pathologist, but ended up, as of now, considering applying general surgery. But then that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have an open mind.
Yeah.
Went in every rotation, eager to learn, and, trying to see if this is something that I want to do in the future. And I think just being willing to learn new things is along a similar thread. Even like right now for my research, I would have never thought I'd be taking a research year, out of med school to do health policy research. I've always had this very vague idea that, I want to make a difference as a doctor, and I want to create change for a system that I believe has a lot of flaws and is not equitable. And, if I was just like, I'm going to finish medical school, I'm just going to take these 4 years, do what I got to do, and, head off to the next phase, I would have never had such a great opportunity to be at a world-class institution like Beth Israel with the mentor I have now and do like amazing work that, I've always dreamed of doing, but never really knew how.
Yeah. Okay, so very vague question, but how do you know if you're doing enough? Like, how do you know that, like, I'm sure you get that feeling of imposter syndrome or just simply feeling like you're not doing enough. How do you get over that feeling?
Oh my goodness. I have these moments like every day where I think it just comes with being like a medical student and always like feeling like you have to be perfect and, be perfect at everything you do and do everything, right? And I think also too, as you might know or don't know, even after graduating medical school, you're not guaranteed a residency spot. You have to apply, and sometimes people go unmatched. So I think that kind of all this stress of feeling like you need to be perfect and have a perfect application to match into residency, it kind of forces you to always feel like you're never doing enough because, there's always someone doing a little bit more. And I think that's such a terrible mentality, and probably is the reason why a lot of people have imposter syndrome, is just because, you're never going to be, everyone's going to be always doing something more than you are, and I don't think that should stop you from actually enjoying the experience of medical school. If you're always waking up every day and telling yourself, I'm not doing enough, it's going to be a miserable experience, you're kind of just setting yourself for success. So something I've always tried to do when I have these moments of feeling like I'm an imposter or not feeling like I'm doing enough is like looking back at everything I've done and realize, I've done so much, and I should be very thankful of all the opportunities I've been given and everything I accomplished. And oftentimes that mindfulness helps me overcome these moments of like panic or anxiety because I feel like I'm not enough. And I remember when I came here to Beth Israel for my research year, I had so many moments in my few months that I've been here where I just felt like everyone here is so smart. All of them like went to Harvard Medical School and are here, at the best institution in the world doing all this great research. And which is true, they're all really smart people. And, this being here at Beth Israel, you really get to meet very outstanding people. But they all like are eager to help me learn and help address, any of the deficiencies or any places where I feel like I don't know enough. It never feels competitive. It always feels like they're here to help me. And I can't offer that much because I'm mostly here learning and developing my research skills. But I like to think that, I'm here bringing something to the table. And, we're a team. And that's what I get a sense of when I'm here.
Yeah. I like the way you answered that question. You started off very kind of sad in a sense, kind of like hopelessness, and then you bring it back up onto a more lighthearted note. Keeping it on a lighthearted note, do you want to touch upon your experience with LMSA? Because I see that you're the LMSA Northeast co-direct-elect. So
yeah. Oh my goodness. LMSA has been such a huge part of my experience in medical school. So a little bit of background. LMSA has 5 regions. I am in the Northeast region, personally the best region, I believe. Temple has a strong LMSA presence. They have been chapter of the year for about, I forget, maybe like 3 years, maybe going on 4. They're like dominating in the Northeast. And me being that I go to medical school an hour away from the Temple campus, ever since like my first day at medical school, I was like, well, why don't we have our own LMSA? So we didn't have a chapter at all. We've been a campus for about 10 years. And, you know, we have a large Latino population. Like, why don't we have one here? So I actually, with a few of my colleagues, started our own chapter at St. Luke's. And before even having our own chapter established, our school actually paid for me to attend my first LMSA conference, which was at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland. And I did not know anything about LMSA, how elections worked or anything like that, but I saw a few weeks before the conference that they were holding elections during that time. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to apply. You know, what's the worst that can happen? Went to the conference, it went great. And then the last day of conference is when elections are always held. And I remember there were 16 other people applying for service chair, which is the position I applied for. And I was like,
that's crazy.
Holy smokes. Like, there is no way I'm going to like be elected. But I went up there, you know, told them my story, my goals for what I hope to accomplish as service chair. And ultimately I won the election, which was like, it was such a shocker. You know, I was never really involved with LMSA, didn't even have my own chapter back at my school. And I was elected to like the regional position, which was awesome. Fast forward a few months, we started our own chapter at our school finally. And our chapter has been amazing. You know, the family that I told you I mentioned I had back at my medical school, you know, it's all of my LMSA members. We have been through thick and thin. I remember we met at a Starbucks to talk about starting our own chapter, and we still talk every single day. They have been my rock and have taken our chapter, our very young chapter, only about a few years old, and taken it to the moon. We hosted the big regional conference that happens every year at our institution. Like over 500 people attended. We had Javier Becerra. He was the 52nd Health and Human Services Secretary, the current position that JFK Jr. holds, RFK Jr. holds. So like having such a big speaker come, like it was such an amazing event, and that was put on by a chapter that only existed for like less than 2 years, less than a year actually. And for that conference, actually, after I was service chair, I really enjoyed that, but I wanted to move up and was elected as conference co-chair, and that's when we hosted the conference. And now I was elected as co-director-elect, which is a 2-year position. So I've been in this position for a few months now and will assume the director position next year, along with my colleague Yesenia, who is at Penn State College of Medicine. But I say that, as you can see, I've been with LMSA for a while and have moved up slowly up in leadership, but I owe so much of my success and so much of my experience is a lot of what I'm doing now is because of LMSA, the connections, the leadership skills, the ideas I bring to my research are all motivated by the values that LMSA has set forward, you know, caring about your community, improving health outcomes for Latino community, and also supporting medical students. We're the Latino Medical Student Association, of course, so a lot of our programming, our scholarships and program is aimed at supporting the current Latino medical students. And I think right now it's such a pivotal time, you know, with DEI cuts and changes to financial aid, and who gets to attend medical school is kind of like up in the air, right? If you can't take out loans to go to medical school, it's going to change the demographics of who attends, unfortunately.
That's true.
Yeah. We have a lot of advocacy and programming aimed at addressing these issues. So yeah, I love LMSA. It's at the forefront of it's one of the things at the forefront of what keeps me going and inspired and whole, I would say. I always look forward to our conferences and meeting other LMSA members wherever I go.
Yeah, I always love hearing people talk about LMSA because it's always a positive experience. It keeps it really nice. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you a couple quick questions to wrap this up. So you mentioned Starbucks. Do you drink coffee a lot?
Oh, probably a little too much, I would say.
What's your Starbucks order?
Oh, it's just a straight black coffee.
Black coffee. The last person I spoke
love
to,
black coffee.
the last person I spoke to was a cardiothoracic surgeon resident, and he told me he just drinks straight black coffee as well. I think black coffee is a common theme. Yeah, it sounds.
Yeah, it's so good, and obviously once you develop a liking for black coffee, because I remember I started drinking it in college, and I was like, "This is disgusting. This tastes like mud water. Like, what is this?" But then you just learn to like it.
Okay.
And I don't know, it just wakes you up, and it's kind of refreshing. Or maybe I'm just like delusional and convince myself that it tastes good when in fact it's not. But it does the job.
Okay. Yeah. No, he told me that instead he likes it just for the taste. He doesn't drink it for the caffeine at all. He likes it just for the taste. Yeah. Are you a person that needs coffee to function, or?
I'd like to think I don't, but I think in reality I do. It always something that I look forward to in the morning. Even just the process of making coffee, I feel like it's pretty fun. It's like a little bit of chemistry in a way.
Yeah.
And I like to make my own cold brew at home, so that's also fun. Playing with different like beans and trying to change the flavor with how I grind the beans. I don't know, it's fun. It's a fun process. So I guess to answer your question, maybe I am a little dependent on coffee.
Okay. So Christmas is coming up soon. What's your coffee machine? Because you said you made coffee at home. I know Keurigs are pretty popular, but what do you use?
I was actually just on the Macy's website looking for deals to find out, like a Breville or something. But I'm very simple. I think I'm totally fine with my cold brew machine. It's literally just a glass container with a bag where you pour the beans in.
Yeah.
It's nothing complicated.
Okay.
Maybe get a Breville once I have the money to afford it in the near future, or so far off future.
What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote. I think one I have been saying a lot recently for like fun, but also like as a reminder to lock in, is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. I think it's kind of like a rally cry for me when I feel like things are getting hard, to remind me that, when things get tough, you just got to get tougher.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that's like a pretty cliche saying, but I think I found myself saying it a lot recently. Yeah.
I think most good sayings are cliche, so yeah, that's great. Yeah. Do you have a favorite book?
Favorite book?
Yeah.
I wish I had it on me right now. The Song of the Cell, I think. I can't pronounce the author's name, but it kind of talks about the history of the cell. I don't know why I find that so interesting. I like medical history, so that was kind of interesting to see how we got to where we are now, knowing all this stuff about the cell and all these like complex mechanisms, but it all started with some guy looking through a microscope and thinking that a cork looked like a prison cell, and that's why they called it a cell. That's probably not like an accurate story, but I think it's just seeing how medicine has evolved, and I thought that was such a cool book.
Okay. All right, so very last question. Do you have any thoughts on this podcast? Anything I could do to better improve it? Or maybe I should make the questions more professional or more personal? What do you think?
I thought this is really cool. I think it allowed me an opportunity to like reflect on my experience so far, but also offer, some sort of advice for those who, were once in my shoes. Like I mentioned, mentorship is so important, being a mentor and being a mentee. So I think this is really cool. And I think how you ask the questions, I think is probably dependent on who you're interviewing. One constructive criticism I would say is the list of questions, maybe narrowing them down, because it's kind of hard to anticipate the questions And it's so funny that you asked that last one you asked about the quote. I'm like, I hope he doesn't ask that, because I couldn't think of a quote, and the only thing that could come to mind was literally what I said. I mean, it's genuine, you know. I don't want to look up a fake, like, not a fake quote, but a quote that sounds like very philosophical and deep. And,
yeah, being performative with the quote, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is AP Med. We just interviewed Marcos Gomez Ambriz, and a theme I would give for him is keep fighting no matter your position. Just push forward.